So welcome everyone to dedication to our newest designation from the Sons of the American Revolution. I'm Lisa Daly. I'm the president of the Rombout Rural Cemetery Association. This is Ethan Dickerman, our secretary, Tim Middlebrook from the SAR, and our town of Fishkill supervisor, Ozzy Albra. So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Middlebrook to speak. Thank you.
And the microphone's for the camera, so I'm going to speak loud because those that have been to these know I can speak loud, and the cars are going to be on. I'll let him adjust accordingly. But welcome everybody. For everybody that doesn't know me, my name is Tim Middlebrook. I'm the president of the Columbia Mid-Hudson Valley chapter of the SAR, Sons of the American Revolution. The purposes of the Sons of the American Revolution are patriotic, historical, and educational, and include those intended or designed to perpetuate the memory of the men who, by their services or sacrifices during the War of the American Revolution, achieved the independence of the American people and marked the scenes of the American Revolution by appropriate memorials. At this point, I'd like to read a letter from the Pomeroy Association. The Pomeroy Foundation, actually, are the ones that, basically provide the signs, pay for the signs. You'll hear about Bill Pomeroy here in a second and why he does what he does here today. So let me read that. We'll fight with the traffic and we'll go from there. Again, William G. Pomeroy Foundation out of Syracuse. Congratulations to all of us, or from all of us, at the William G. Pomeroy Foundation on the dedication of your Patriot burial marker at the Rombout Rural Cemetery. We send greetings from Syracuse as you pay tribute to the Revolutionary War veterans interned here at these hallowed grounds. We wish we could be with you on this occasion. At the Pomeroy Foundation, one of our main initiatives is to help people commemorate their community's history. We do this by offering fully funded historical markers and plaques nationwide, as well as several other history-related initiatives, such as the National Historic Marker Day, celebrated annually on the last Friday of April. We feel strongly that the markers educate the public, encourage pride of place, and promote historic tourism. How did our mission come about? I've been very passionate about history since my childhood. I have fond memories of riding in the car with my father, who was a traveling salesman, and seeing historical markers we would stop for and read together. In 2005, I established the Pomeroy Foundation and made funding markers a priority amongst our first initiatives. I learned that New York State had stopped funding these marker programs decades ago and had left it to the communities to raise funds on their own. This was the impetus for our first marker grant program, and later became the springboard for several more programs, including the Patriot Burials program, of which we were the first. Empire State Society was the first to do that. I am an active member of the SAR and the Pomeroy Foundation. We are proud to support the mission of the Empire State Society, Sons of the American Revolution, by funding the Patriot Burial Markers. The Sons of the American Revolution's commitment to preserving and commemorating the history of American patriots at their final resting places is important work. We extend our appreciation to the ESS SAR, the Columbia Mid-Hudson Valley chapter, members of the Daughter of the American Revolution, the community down here in Fishkill, and everyone who has contributed to this marker project. I'm not sure if we have our CAR kids here today or not. They were coming. They are here. And the CAR. I don't want it because I knew they were coming. We know this marker commemorates these veterans who served in various regiments in Dutchess County Militia, will ensure their contributions to our nation's founding and will stand as an enduring testament to future generations. Thank you and congratulations on your marker. Sincerely, Bill Pomeroy, founder and trustee of the William G. Pomeroy Foundation. So that is from him.
Hello everyone, I'm Ozzy Albra, the supervisor of the town of Fishkill. Thank you for inviting me. And as everybody knows, I'm a big proponent of American history, especially the history in the town of Fishkill. One of my prized possessions is something I'm wearing on my left lapel right here, is the Minuteman. You get that when you leave the United States Army honorably. The Minuteman is also on the Village of Fishkill town seal, the town of Fishkill town seal, and the weapon that is on that seal is on the Chief Nimham statue. So I just want to let everybody know how important it is that the Minuteman also continues today on the lapels of the United States Army infantrymen as the respect they have for the people that served and died for the American Revolution. So we have a proclamation from the town board. Proclamation recognizing the patriotism and sacrifice of the Revolutionary War patriots. Whereas Rombout Rural Cemetery is honoring Revolutionary War patriots buried in their grounds, and whereas on Sunday, November 3rd, 2024, the Pomeroy Foundation will be dedicating a burial marker to honor these veterans for our War of Independence, and whereas the town of Fishkill will be forever grateful for the patriotism and sacrifice of these individuals, and whereas their contributions to our town, state, and county will always remain in our memories, and whereas the following list is the names of the individuals to be honored and memorialized at today's ceremony: Daniel Annan, Dr. William Annan, Gershom Brown, Garrett Brower, Samuel Cure, Jacob Griffin Jr., John Height, Joseph Jackson, Oliver Ledoux, Peter Ledoux, David Mead, Ephraim Schofield, John Van Wyck, Dr. Theodorus Van Wyck, and John Wood. Now, therefore, it be resolved, the town board of the town of Fishkill does hereby proclaim its gratitude to the named individuals in recognition of their acts of selfless patriotism and sacrifice in serving as patriots in the Revolutionary War, and be it further resolved, the town board of the town of Fishkill shall present a copy of this proclamation to the Rombout Rural Cemetery on November 3rd, 2024, in a spirit of gratitude and recognition by order of the town board of the town of Fishkill on this third day of November 2024. Thank you. It's for you guys.
All right, we're going to unveil at this time. Who's unveiling? You're unveiling with me? All right. Here we go. Ready? Yep. Forward, backward, doesn't matter. Go. Go where you're way. Whoa. There we go. As it says, Patriot Burials, Rombout Rural Cemetery, at least 15 veterans of the Revolutionary War interred here between 1784 and 1786. William C. Pomeroy Foundation, 2024. So there we go. This will stay here for forever. It says at least 15. There are more that we're aware of. Pomeroy is very specific with their requirements on proof of burial and proof of service. Proof of service we can usually find pretty easily. Proof of burial not as easy. So we know there's more. Rombout knows there's more, but we prove 15 to Pomeroy, and he's paying for the sign. So there you go. So anyway, so there you go. Thank you very much.
I want to thank everybody for coming today and helping us to honor these men. And thank you to Mr. Albra. Thank you, Mr. Middlebrook. Thank you to all of you. And thank you to our Board of Trustees, who I think have done an amazing job. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. Anyone who wishes to stick around, we will give little tours. You can ask any question you want. We'll do our best to answer you. And there are refreshments down by the tree over there. Some cider and donuts that were graciously donated by Adams Farraker Farms. So stick around. Thank you.
We'll just get started now. So you're at the Rombout Rural Cemetery. It is on the traditional homeland of the Wappinger people who occupied this land through time immemorial. Prior to the Dutch settlement, these would have been lands that looked very different than they do now. Forested, some farmland. We're right near the Fishkill Creek, so it would have been a fairly fertile area. It wouldn't be unreasonable to imagine some sort of settlement along here. But following the Dutch arrival and then the expansion from Manhattan northward along the Hudson and settlement into the area, you started to see little towns develop. So, for example, today the oldest house in Dutchess County is the Madam Brett homestead. Madam Brett's father, Francis Rombout, purchased several thousand acres from the Wappinger people that this lot of land was part of. The land that this church, or what became a church and the cemetery, was part of, was owned by a man named Jacobus Terbos, who donated it to create a church, or what he called a Kirk of the Scots. It was a Presbyterian church, and it was one of the original three churches that were built in Fishkill: Trinity Church, the Dutch Reformed Church, both down in the village, and then the Presbyterian Church. It was sometimes called the Middle Church because it was between the village of Fishkill and Hopewell Junction or East Fishkill. And that church was built in the 1740s. We had the first burial in the 1740s. It was a Mrs. Ledoux. Unfortunately, the records are, favoring the woman's last name rather than her first, so we don't know too much about her. But there are other Ledoux family members buried here. The church would have stood in the green right here that's now vacant. And during the American Revolution, this church became a hospital. It was seized by order for use to treat those who were ill. We believe there were various soldiers ill with smallpox and maybe other ailments that were recuperating here. But at the time, the weather was quite harsh. It was basically the Little Ice Age, and it became very difficult to survive. And the records show that they were actually stripping the siding from the church to use in their campfires, which would have been around the church. And we're talking about a much smaller church than those that we see here today, like Trinity Church and the Dutch Reformed. It probably would have been a small, like one-room, maybe single-story structure. But as the story goes, the soldiers damaged the church so badly trying to fuel their fires that they had to knock it down, and then a new one was built after the war. And that second church was partially made of stone, and it stood until the 1860s when some sort of event occurred that resulted in a fire. It wasn't clear if it was lightning or an unattended wood stove or something else, that instigated it. But records show that it went up quite quickly, and there's in that account of the fire burning, they talk about the steeple, which was something like 120 feet tall, collapsing, right down, and it, it was a real spectacle, if you will, a tragedy. The church at the time did not have insurance, so they ended up not rebuilding. Their membership shifted to the Presbyterian churches in the neighboring towns, and that was in about 1865, mid-1860s. And so activity here came, to a slower pace. They continued to have burials for those who were members of the church. But by the 1880s, they realized no new church is going to be built, in fact, but we would like to maintain the grounds that have a use as a burial place. So they created the Rombout Rural Cemetery Association, whose descendant members and trustees were here today for the dedication, to ensure that it remain a burial place in perpetuity. As I may have mentioned earlier, but others will note, there are people from all walks of life buried here. Many of the early members were Presbyterians, but it has expanded to people of different faiths, backgrounds. There are veterans of nearly every armed conflict buried here, from the American Revolution through to Vietnam. I think the only veterans of active wars that are not buried here would be Desert Storm to present. There are a number of reverends who are buried here, and other prominent women, including one of the women who was involved with the Fishkill Tea Party during the Revolution, and I believe it was 1776. There was a store on the other side of 52 here from us, to the south side, that was run by Dirk Brinkerhoff, who owned the house over here, and the local women were displeased with the cost of his goods, specifically his teas. And very similar to the Boston Tea Party, they held their own, where they demanded that he sell them tea at a fair price, lest they throw it into the Fishkill Creek, which is further to the south. And the woman who led that, Catherine Schutt, is buried in this cemetery over towards the Green Shed. And It's pretty amazing because in the 12 years that I've been here, in the nearly 45 going on 50 that my Uncle Tim has been working here, we have uncovered story after story that was hidden behind these stones, and also through connections with descendants who visit the site. Would you have anything you'd like to add?
I came in on the middle of it. The only thing I'd like to add is that this cemetery is representative of so many across the United States. Not just here, not just the Revolution. We have soldiers from every war except the recent wars, and maybe the Spanish-American War, that served the country, came back to be buried in the community that they grew up in. And that is what the ethos of the American soldier has always been. Yeah, we have our special places like Arlington and Gettysburg and the national cemeteries, but this is most representative of what I can remember as being a kid. We came back to the community we served or served for. But through history, not just those things you'll notice. You'll notice if you see enough of these stones, in the old days, women died relatively young, not all of them. It was related most likely to childbirth and poor maternal health care. And their husbands would be married to their sisters after that occurred. We were a relatively small community. You'll see where whole families seem to die within a very short period of time, as in 1919, we have a series of graves with children over here. What do you think of when you think of 1919? Spanish flu. So history is represented here, probably on these grounds and others like it across the United States, more than a lot of places you can visit. It's nice to visit the Washington Memorial, and it's nice to read the inscription at Lincoln or the inscription on the Statue of Liberty, and that represents a lot. But the folks that lived those periods of time that are buried here were actual doers, and that's what we were created for, and they came back and did their jobs.
Are people still buried here?
Yes, we have plots available. My mom and dad are buried over there. We have a veteran of World War II. My grandparents are buried there. I have two aunts over there. I have a piece of tax-free land over here that I plan to be buried on one of these days.
What's your plan?
That's my plan, unless they institute a tax on it. Then I'll have to figure out how to pay that off each year. So,
You know, one thing I would want to add is that there traditionally is this misconception that cemeteries are solely sad or scary places, when in reality, you know, this is a historical landscape, and it's a landscape that is meant for memorializing people. And what we see across the land are above-ground artifacts, if we reference archaeology, for example, where each stone represents the person, but also maybe what they or their children thought of them and how they wanted them to be remembered. And so you'll see different icons, different figures, maybe a cherub, maybe a willow and urn pattern, and that communicates something very special about the way they wanted to be remembered. You'll see grand monuments, obelisks, and stones made of granite that were sourced from far away, maybe talking about, you know, this person was high status or came from an upper class. You might find one that's much more humble, and it, like as Tim was saying, it's representative of the full spectrum of, you know, Fishkill's, you know, community through the past. Tim has found evidence of a Fishkill-based gravestone cutter from the mid-1800s, and we also have examples of gravestones that were cut by a gentleman named John Zuricher, who was a American patriot and the most prolific gravestone cutter out of colonial New York City. And there are other individuals buried here, ranging from an elector for President, I believe, James Monroe, who was a Van Wyck, doctors, surgeons. It's pretty amazing. Anything you'd like to add?
take a look at them.
Okay. So if you'd all like to go around, we could go to a few of them.
Yeah.
This was an activity that we had thought to do, which is linking the census record with gravestones. because you can learn quite a bit from a gravestone, and you can learn quite a bit from census records. And then when you bring them together, you can learn quite a bit more. This is quite relevant given that we had a census in 2020 and we'll have another one in 2030. The U.S. Census is a government study that aims to learn about the total number and ethnic demographics of the country's residents, as well as other information. The United States conducted its first census in 1790 and repeating the process every 10 years. For the first 5 census records, the federal government mainly sought information on the number of people living within the country to establish the number of representatives the state should have in Congress. Think of the House of Representatives. By 1850, the census started inquiring about occupations, ethnicity, birthplace, educational level, and more. In addition to the U.S. Census, the state of New York began conducting its own census in 1855, repeating it every 10 years thereafter until the early 1900s when they ceased that. The New York State Census is particularly informative because it will tell us again about individuals, their families, agriculture and yieldings, and therefore towns and regions. And we can then, if we're doing genealogy, track families and communities throughout time. Each of these census records act as a snapshot into the past, which is really exciting to researchers. So this activity is going to link us between the census records and the gravestone to tell us a little bit more about people's lives and those buried here. Gravestones, being the above-ground artifacts, will communicate meaningful information about the deceased social status, class, ethnicity, gender, and religion, and sometimes more. In studying a gravestone, we encourage you to look at the following features and compare them to what you're finding in the census record. So, the gravestones you'll find here are generally made of red sandstone, marble, and granite. The stone will be oriented a particular direction, generally a cardinal direction. We'll look at the degree of ornamentation, and we're also going to look at the number of characters on a gravestone, as well as the name, birth date, death date, and maybe markers of rank or occupation. So we're going to look at 4 individuals, 2 from the Rev War, 1 from that period, and then another gentleman from the Civil War. So we'll be able to look at a bunch of different census records together. So the first one will be Daniel Annan, who served in the American Revolution. So to answer your question about these stones toppling over, gravestones do have a tendency to fall over, sometimes by act of nature, sometimes by human activity. This cemetery, decades ago, before probably even my birth, did experience some vandalism. And if you look around, you'll see some stones that are broken in unusual ways and in unusual places that just don't really make sense. Those are the markers of vandalism. These stones could be evidence of vandalism. The break was quite low. The stone would have been up much higher and probably yay high, very similar to this one. And it's possible that someone came in here and pushed on it just right, and the fact that the mass of the stone is above ground would have aided it in breaking. But it's also possible that through freeze-thaw, the stone became lopsided and its mass caused it to topple. As you can see here, through freeze-thaw, this stone has started to lean. This is probably a 300+ pound stone. So this stone does need to be straightened in the very near future, which our association members and volunteers do periodically. In the summer, we work once per month to try and straighten stones, lift stones, make them upright again. This is one stone that we'll probably be working towards in the future. But in this activity, one of the 4 individuals we're looking at is Daniel Annan. Daniel Annan was born in Baskin Ridge, New Jersey in 1753, and then came to Dutchess County about 1770, and he served in the American Revolution. the first census record that you're looking at, so this would be the second page, shows Daniel Annan. He is on the right side, highlighted in orange. And the way these censuses work is the name that's listed is the head of house. And then you have columns to the right that identify the number of individuals corresponding to whatever the category is that is listed above. So the first category, which we have a number 1 in for Daniel Annan, is free white males under the age of it's a little difficult to tell. Probably 16 years of age, because it looks like the next column is number of free white males above a certain age. And then it talks about, I believe, females in the third column. And then we have other free persons. So that would be a column that would identify perhaps a free, black man or woman who would be living with them. And then the fourth column, or fifth column, would identify the number of slaves living at the site, or enslaved people. What we can see here is that Daniel Annan, he wasn't the most affluent person per se, but he was at least maybe middle class. In this period, to have a gravestone was a sign that you had some degree of wealth. You're marking your afterlife. Gravestone cutters of this period and earlier charged by the letter. So when we see a inscription and then some ornamentation, it suggests that this was a slightly more expensive stone. If we look to other stones, like this red sandstone over farther, which was belonged to the wife of Reverend Chauncey Graham, the first minister of the site, you can see a significant amount of text, as well as a winged face and a little bit of a crown. So that would have been a fairly expensive stone to produce, transport from wherever the source was and the maker, and then have installed. So as we walk around, you don't have to come up with it right now, but we were encouraging everyone to maybe identify one interesting fact on the individuals that we're looking at, maybe from the gravestone or from the census record. And then we can talk about it when we head back over to get more cider and donuts.
This was 55.
What was that?
The survey was 55. Census.
This census was, this one that we're looking at is, I believe, 17.
Oh, this is earlier.
Yeah, so this gentleman died in 1848 or 1844, and the census that we're looking at with him is from 1790.
Really?
So it's the first census that we're looking at.
Yeah, I'm from Virginia, and they didn't get going until about 1850.
Okay.
A solid census down there.
Okay. Yeah, it varied from area to area.
I have to go, but thank you. This is
Yes, second stone that we're going to be looking at is for Joseph Jackson. Are all of you residents of Fishkill or the nearby area? Poughkeepsie. Okay.
Hyde Park.
So
Monroe.
okay, so on Main Street in Fishkill, if you're heading westward towards Beacon, there once stood the Mid-Hudson Medical Group,
Yes.
a giant yellow building.
Big giant house. Yes.
That was the Jackson House that is associated with Joseph Jackson. Joseph Jackson was a patriot who served in the American Revolution. He and his family owned that house for quite some time. We only learned that he was buried here in the last 5 years, maybe, Tim? 5 or 7 years?
Yeah, that's when we started digging.
Right.
Not digging, but digging.
Yeah, into research. And, his stone is a little bit more simple. He died a little bit earlier than Daniel Annan, I believe. Again, he is buried with family members beside him. This stone is a little bit more emblematic of the late 18th century when they were shifting from red sandstone to marble. A Unfortunately, this type of marble does not weather very well, but we were lucky enough to identify him. And so the second census record that we have is the census of, I think, about 1810, and it identifies Joseph Jackson. It's the same format basically as the 1790 census, where they're really looking at numbers. They're very focused on getting the data needed for identifying how many representatives per state. And so as a researcher, it's very interesting to look at those numbers because there's a lot of data that's still hidden by them, but you can begin to infer based on family members that you can identify which number represents which person within the particular time frame. The top column of these census records, again, breaks it down by age, and then it goes into categories such as free, slave, house. Then they talk about the number of cattle, sheep, and a couple other materials. These are very useful records for learning about these people. So, yep. Yeah, so another person who is not part of this study but of note that should be recognized is that American flag right there marks the burial site of Colonel Jacob Griffin. Jacob Griffin was the owner and operator of Griffin's Tavern, or the Rendezvous as it was known. It was a Dutch stone structure that stood right near Royal Carding. Unfortunately, that structure was lost in a fire, and then the stone walls were lost in the last 5 to 7 years. But he was a fairly prominent individual in the area, had a substantial farm. The family ran the tavern out of their home and then rose to the rank of colonel. What was that?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel, excuse me. He had drill grounds that were further out towards Stormville, I believe they were. And his descendants are still alive and throughout the area. Members of that family, of the Griffin family, married into the Dedell family, another locally prominent name from way back in the day. And descendants are still active in trying to, preserve the memory of their actions, during the American Revolution.
In that tavern, the articles of
Association were written. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
you. So that was basically, people coming together to try and, push for, independence on a local level.
Those articles signified that New York State was joining the Continental Congress in recognizing that there needs to be a push for independence from Britain, and they move on from there. You can Google it.